feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some
I
soccer.
don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college ruled.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. Chris and Dom here, and today we're back on the gridiron for actually a couple episodes.
Yeah, we're going to be talking football here. This is probably one of the greatest playoff games of this little era.
Yeah, it seems weird. We've made it almost a habit of picking the longest football games or discussing the longest football games ever played, and this one kind of falls into line with that.
Yeah, definitely.
So today we're going to be talking about the 2003 NFC Divisional Playoff between the St. Louis Rams, not the now Super Bowl winning Los Angeles Rams, but they did play in St. Louis, and the Carolina Panthers. And boy, was this game awesome.
Yeah, no, it really made me think of, because we just got done with the 2022 playoff Super Bowl, and a lot of those games were like this, where it was just back and forth, great football, long games, where you're just like, man, this is awesome.
It's like, I'm lazy on Sunday, but this is actually, you're not being productive, but at least you're watching something productive. You know what I mean?
No, 100%.
But this game almost reminds me, it actually kind of reminds me a lot of the Chiefs and Dolphins one we talked about.
Yes,
because
definitely.
You look at the matchup between both teams, they're on almost the same trajectories, okay? So like you have Carolina on that trajectory of a young team finally trying to put it together, and then you have the, old warhorse, the St. Louis Rams, the greatest show on turf, kind of nearing the end of their little mini quasi-dynasty run, where they're like fighting to just get that one more Super Bowl to add to the trophy case. And this game has some future ramifications for one of these franchises, which is no bueno for the city that they play in.
Well, we see this happen where, and we bring this up, where games like this, you're just like, we just kind of lost the game, but that kind of changed the trajectory of this franchise, which is crazy to say, because I mean, you go through it every single year and you're not like, that was the game, but when you look back a decade past, you're like, oh, that was the game.
In retrospect and in hindsight, you're like, okay, I totally understand why everything fell out from this.
Yep.
So let's get into talking about the Panthers first. For those of you who don't know, this was their first playoff trip since 1996. Granted, they were an expansion franchise in 1995, but after they made the NFC Championship game, which they lost to the Packers and the old Dong Slinger back in 96, they went through a very dark period as far as franchise lack of success. In fact, they completely bottomed out in 2001 under George Seifert, who won 2 Super Bowls with the 49ers. His stint in Carolina might be what cost him the Hall of Fame.
Well, and this is what we see is just when the stuff is not going right, when the chemistry with players aren't, you know what I mean? When stuff isn't clicking, you can be one of the best coaches of his era and still fail unbelievably. Because you're right, in 2001, they were the worst.
They were the absolute worst. They won week 1. And then they proceeded to lose 15 straight games. And actually, fortunately for them, they didn't have the first pick in the 2002 draft, even though they had the worst record. The Houston Texans were an expansion franchise.
Oh, yeah.
And they elected to pick David Carr, who I don't consider a bust. He was basically Woodland Critter Christmased his entire time being lack of protected in Houston. But the Panthers end up getting future Pro Bowler and, in my opinion, future Hall of Fame defensive end, former basketball player from the University of North Carolina, Julius Peppers, and they start making a lot of key acquisitions onto their roster, but that's kind of what kicked everything off, and they hire John Fox as their head coach, former defensive coordinator of the Giants team that went to the Super Bowl in 2000.
Well, we see them, and this is how you see a lot of football teams that are in a rebuild. They're like, okay, we're going to build defense, and if we catch a quarterback, we'll catch one. But the thing, and you brought it up with Carr, when you draft the quarterback and you're like, all right, here we go, and you don't have protection or you don't have defense to like keep him, to keep him on the field, it's one of those things where it's really detrimental. And Carolina was starting to go at it the right way.
Exactly. And in 2002, Fox did a tremendous job. They finished 7-9, so they're, improving. And then by 2003, they've started kind of getting some pieces together. They finally let Steve Smith, who another Hall of Famer in my opinion, wide receiver, start playing wide receiver and not just be a kick and punt returner. They pick up Steven Davis, who is a very underrated back in the late 90s, early 2000s, just kind of a big bruiser, and pair him with a cutback extraordinaire in Deshaun Foster. They build a veteran offensive line. In 2003, they took Jordan Gross, who became their right and then left tackle for basically a decade. The dude was a staple there for Carolina.
That's gross.
And then, it's gross. And then a very attacking defense.
Yes.
As far as getting up the field with 4 guys, speedy linebackers, and pretty good coverage on the back end. And that season, they finally have a winning record for the first time since '96. They go 11-5, and they win the NFC South, and they get the number 3 seed. A lot of that is due to Davis, who had almost 1,500 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns. Then you had the passing game with Smith and Moose Muhammad, which we talked about in our 96 draft. He's one of those wide receivers from that class.
Yep.
He was a great run blocker, but also because Smith is kind of shorter. He's like maybe an inch or two shorter than me, but Moose was a very tall, rangy wide receiver who could perfect number 2.
I was going to say that he slides into a number 2 absolutely perfectly because he can block and he's a little bigger and like all of that.
Oh yeah, and then as far as their defense is concerned, you have Peppers, who is finally coming into his own and the player that he eventually became. Inside, you have Brenton Buckner, who was one of my favorite players for the Steelers before he ran afoul of the organization. Just a big-bodied dude you can put in the middle, along with Chris Jenkins, who was an all-pro that year. I don't know if you remember how good Chris Jenkins is. He would never light up the stat sheet, but was just a force on the interior. And Mike Rucker, who made the Pro Bowl with 12 sacks. The speedy linebackers I talked about, Dan Morgan, Will Witherspoon, and Greg Favors. And then in the defensive backfield, you had Mike Minter, who led the team in tackles and picks, Terry Cousin, Reggie Howard, and Ricky Manning on the outside. So, that year they finished 10th in points allowed a game. So, they were a very good defense. But the final piece that they needed was Jake Delhomme, their quarterback. Or as Chris Berman used to call one of my favorite nicknames, daylight coming, you got a Delhomme. But he comes in after the first week because they had Rodney Peete, Tucson's own, as their starter.
Yes.
And Delhomme had kind of bounced around the NFL at that point. Actually, when this game was played, it was his 29th birthday.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
They mentioned it during the telecast. Journeyman went to University of Louisiana Lafayette. I think they're just Louisiana now.
Yeah.
Played with the Saints, which he should have stuck in New Orleans. With a last name like Delhomme, come on. You're like Farmer Franning it at that point. But has a good year for them. Just a steady kind of game manager, knows what his weapons are, and enters in week 2. And the team starts 8-2 that season. And everyone's like, they're kind of like the shock of the NFL. But they have a 3-game losing streak after they start 8-2 of some close losses. They lose 24-20 to the Cowboys. Then they lose 25-16 to the Eagles. That was a game where their kicker, John Casey, missed a ton of field goals.
Oh, yeah.
And then they lose to the Falcons, Michael Vickless Falcons, actually, in overtime. But they do end up winning their final 3 to put them into the postseason as the 3 seed.
And there was a lot of hype going around this team because starting 8-2, they were looked at as are these guys Super Bowl favorites? Mm-hmm. And then this is what I find so interesting. If they had scattered these losses, if it was win-loss, 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 people would still been all right. But the 3 streak of losses, people were kind of well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with this team.
No, I know. And they're just steady all around. Even their special teams, despite that Eagles game, Casey's a veteran kicker. Todd Sauerbrunn makes the Pro Bowl. Your 2 top receivers, Smith and Muhammad, go for basically 11 touchdowns and almost 2,000 yards.
Yep.
So, they're a good, solid team. People are thinking, okay, well, maybe, they play wild card weekend. They get a home game. They're scratching the surface of their potential, and they go out and just kick the crap out of the Cowboys.
Yep.
Wild card weekend, 29-10. Davis has a great game. They forced some turnovers, and Quincy Carter, who was eventually replaced the following season due to, I think, drugs, they just give him problems all game long. And that sets up this matchup with the Rams, who get the first round bye. They're the second seed that year in the playoffs at Trans-World Dome in St. Louis. And the Rams, dang, they're a good team this year. They're finally back. They had a down 2002 where Warner was hurt. They had the Super Bowl hangover, and they have a new quarterback in 2003.
Yeah.
Warner is replaced after breaking his thumb by Mark Bulger, who another great Berman nickname or Berman reference. I don't know if you know who Ray Bulger is. He's the guy that played the Scarecrow in Wizard of Oz.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
every time he'd like go back to throw in the highlights, he'd be like, "And there's Mark. Da 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 da. If I only had Isaac Bruce."
That's great.
But their offense is still stacked.
I was going to say they still have pretty much every other piece from this Super Bowl winning team.
Yeah, they have a great veteran offensive line with Hall of Famer Orlando Pace at left tackle and Kyle Turley, who we did an episode on at right tackle.
Check out that.
Oh, yeah.
Delicious marijuana he slings.
Oh, yeah. And Roy Lee Reynolds was our guest on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then outside you have Isaac Bruce, Hall of Fame. Torrey Holt eventually will be in the Hall of Fame. Dane Looker is a very good slot receiver for them. He kind of takes the place of Oz Hakeem this season. And, of course, you have the man, the myth, the legend, Marshall Falk, former Aztec, finally getting healthy again in the offensive backfield.
Well, and this is something that I saw with the lead up to this game it was Panthers defense against Rams offense, which you see that a lot where it's like, no. Panthers has a good offense, Rams has a good defense, but this is where the matchup is going to really like who's going to win this. And we see it happen. So
no, I mean, and I do want to bring up about the Rams defense because this year,
yes,
that was always their knock. They're actually really good this season as far as their productivity and what they have designed. They were 13th in points against. So, I mean, they're like on that Panthers kind of level. And their defensive coordinator is now currently the head coach of the Houston Texans, Lovie Smith.
Yep.
And, Leonard Little, their best pass rusher on one side, Grant Wistrom, great pass rusher on the other side. And then they have some really speedy linebackers in Robert Thomas and Pisa Tino Isamoa, former UH Rainbow. And Tommy Polley, he was very fat. He had a ton of interceptions. Like, I mean, these are guys that can play in pass coverage. And it's a good defense to have when you have that type of explosive offense because if you get a lead on anybody, they're playing catch up, and you're going to have to do some pass defending. But Adam Archuleta, one of their safeties, former ASU guy, 5 sacks and a pick, 79 tackles. Demetrius Butler and Aeneas Williams also back there. Aeneas Williams is a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah.
He's now playing safety. He had moved from corner after he came over from the Cardinals. So the matchup is there. It's set to be a great game, kind of almost contrasting styles when you talk about the offense and defense of the Rams and the Panthers. But you want to get into the game?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, St. Louis is 12-4. They get that bye. And, let's start it off.
Yeah.
So Panthers get the ball first. And their kick returner for this game is a very interesting person. Do you know who Rod Smart is?
No.
Rod Smart, one of their backup running backs, was the man in the XFL with the greatest jersey ever. Rod Smart is He Hate Me.
Yep.
Which is just fantastic. So Smart takes it out, gets about 30 yards or so, and they start actually moving the ball in the first drive, which is very inspiring if you're the Panthers, just to keep Bulger and the rest of that offense on the field. Smith makes a couple of catches, and I should mention their third wide receiver in this game, who they went to on the first play, but it was incomplete, was Ricky Prohl.
Oh, yeah.
And Ricky Prohl, if you don't know, caught the important touchdown in the 99 NFC title game for the St. Louis Rams to send them to the Super Bowl. And so on this first drive, they eventually end up stalling. The Rams kind of hunker down, or they eventually end up stalling, and they have to punt it back to the Rams, which kind of stinks. But the Rams come back out on offense, and they're like gangbusters. Like, they're tearing them up.
Well, you see this, and like you were saying, like how when the Panthers start to like drive down, you're like, oh, we can do this. When the Rams get on the field and they're really just moving the ball without, I mean, what it looks like without any effort, and that's supposed to be the Panthers. Like, their defense is what they're trying to hang it on. You're just like, oh, the Rams are going to run through this team.
And they were going like a hot knife through butter. And the NFL, I should bring this up because the way Mike Martz, their old offensive coordinator under Vermeil and their current head coach at this time, Bulger was really good at this, and it's almost the NFL that you see today. He'd read low to high on passing plays, meaning he would look short, just get the ball out of his hands fast, and it would drive defenses nuts because on their first possession, they get a 24-yard pass to Looker, who they called Littler Ricky Prohl, and White, obviously. Both guys are white. And then an 18-yard pass to Bruce, and they get it first and goal at the Panthers 4. But this will be the recurring theme up until the fourth quarter for St. Louis is they can't get anything done in the red zone.
Nothing.
And when I say red zone, I mean inside the 20, but they have the ball inside Carolina's 10-yard line a lot in this game.
3-4 times before they do anything. And it's interesting because they have Falk, and you think that he's going to punch it in or something like that, and they really just can't do anything with that. And
on this first drive, Falk made an amazing play to kind of cut a ball outside on a handoff inside the 5, but I believe Mike Minter stayed home on the play and pushed him out at about the 2. And then they ran this weird bootleg with Bulger from about the 2 or 3 yard line that just stalled.
Yep.
He got eaten alive, and they had to send in Pro Bowl kicker Jeff Wilkins to finish the job. So they're up 3-0, and we're already halfway through the first quarter because both of these drives for both Carolina and St. Louis were pretty extended. And you're thinking, all right, well, they got a field goal. Few more drives, they'll finish them off. But that's not the case. On their next drive, Carolina, Davis has a pretty big run. The problem is, as they're moving the ball, they get, again, Steve Smith comes up big. They're at St. Louis's 45, and then Tommy Polley makes a great interception, basically one-handed off of DeLome. And he returns the ball way down into Carolina territory. So they have St. Louis is driving again.
Yeah, so they're right there again, getting into the red zone. And you're thinking, especially like the way this team had been playing all season, you're thinking like, oh, we're going to take this. It's going to be 10-0 right here. Our defense is still stepping up. And they just can't punch in a single, like we were talking about this before the podcast because this is such a close game. And Dom just goes, yeah, think about if they scored on any of those attempts that they should have scored on. Like, they literally were like 0 for 5 in the red zone. You're just like, yeah, I mean, this game could have been a blowout.
And it was just really a missed opportunity because on one of the plays, Bulger has Bruce wide open on a fade in the corner of the end zone. He's got separation, and he doesn't look for the ball. He looks for it too late, and it's incomplete. It was like a layup type of touchdown.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
And he missed Bruce again on third down, and Wilkins has to come in and kick another 20-yard-ish field goal. So they're up 6-0, but if you're up 14-0 at home, and this was a time when the Trans World Dome was absolutely rocking for St. Louis. One stat I wanted to bring up is they had won 14 in a row coming into this game on their home field.
Well, and you pointed this out, was the defense is made for pass defense. So it's like one of those things where it's you go up 14-0, you put the pressure on the Panthers offense to start making something happen, and you're pretty much, they're playing into your game plan. And that's what sucks that for the Rams that neither one of these really converted into a touchdown.
And a lot of credit needs to be given to Carolina's pass rush and their ability to play red zone defense and go like, paper cut us to death if you want, but you're not getting sevens. And on their following drive, on the first play from scrimmage, Davis runs it 65 yards from a strong I formation. There was a great wham block, I think, from tight end Chris Mangum on the play.
Yeah.
Coming across kind of the formation and their fullback, Brad Hoover. The hole is huge. And Davis, not necessarily as fast as Foster, but once he gets ahead of steam, it is really hard to bring that dude down. Gets all the way inside St. Louis's 5-yard line where Aeneas Williams saves a touchdown for the moment. Delhomme, there's a false start on Jermaine Wiggins after the first down, so they're backed up. Delhomme throws incomplete. And then on third down, a very strange
Well, it's just like a horrible decision. So like the play is kind of breaks down. He does like a toss, a lateral, whatever. And you hear the announcer, he's just like, oh, he really should have just taken the sack right there and they should have kicked it, because he literally has he just does like here's a fumble.
Yeah.
Like it's really a horrible play that the Panthers were unbelievably lucky that.
Yeah, because they had gotten backed all the way up. They had a good 9-yard run by Nick Goings, who was their third string running back, because on that play that Davis had 65 yards, he screwed up his quad.
I saw. You see it right at the end.
And he goes to the sideline and he's so mad. And what you see throughout this game is Carolina's offensive line is winning the line of scrimmage. They are winning the line of scrimmage. It's a day made for Stephen Davis to pound that rock and keep the Rams on the sidelines. And from the 5-yard line, like you talked about, it was a shovel pass to Foster that it was a backwards lateral, which kind of ended up helping him.
Yes.
Because if he throws it forward and it hits the ground, it's incomplete.
But it's backwards. So, like I said, it's just like, here's a fumble.
Yeah, and the ball rolls to about the goal line, and Moose Muhammad just falls on it.
Well, they were so unbelievably lucky because there's a Rams player that falls on it, and it just squirts out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, literally just squirts out, and Muhammad's like, oh, shit, there it is.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, so this is one of the luckier touchdowns. You'll see, like, this where you're like, oh, the game could have swung right there.
Yep.
And it ends up being 7-6. So
yeah, Casey kicks the extra point. There's about 11 minutes left in the second quarter, and the Rams end up they challenge the play, actually, and this is what in the first half really screws them. They use their 3 timeouts relatively quickly. One of them they lose on the challenge, but at this time, when Carolina goes up by 1 point during the telecast, Daryl Johnston says to Dick Stockton, that game should be 14-0 right now.
Yeah.
Like, the Rams really squandered a lot of opportunities, and this is not to take anything away from Carolina, because they're the ones that were on the field making the plays. They were the ones winning a line of scrimmage and giving Bulger some issues. But the Rams get the ball, really good field position, and 28 yards on a post pattern for the first play from Bulger. But the Rams have 12 men in the huddle. It's like they kept shooting themselves in the foot at the worst possible time. And on that 12th man call, Mike Carey, who's the referee, was explaining it to the crowd. He said, 12 men on the field, Los Angeles. Obvious foreshadowing.
that's so great.
But they're moving the ball a little bit. Peppers makes a great play to swat the ball on a screen. If you don't know who he is, look up some of his highlights. But he played Division I college basketball. He was about 6'6", 6'7", long arms, like somebody that could really destroy those tunnel screens and those bubble screens on the outside if he timed his jumps properly.
Well, I mean, he could have been a big swing guy in the NBA, but he decided to be one of the better defensive players in the NFL. And it's interesting because we talk about guys like this where you're just like, oh, no, he could have played any sport, and you would be like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, just an athletic freak. But
yes,
they keep moving. There was on 3rd and 10, there was a crucial play where Torrey Holt got a little hook pattern, and they ended up moving the ball to 1st and 10 at Carolina's 14-yard line. So they're between the 20s. There's no contest.
Constantly.
Yeah, there's absolutely no contest. But 3-yard catch after that, then another timeout that they have, and then Falk gets absolutely destroyed by Peppers on a little passing play, and then Jenkins and Peppers, along with Buckner, end up really hurrying a throw from Bulger, and he's barely able to get back to the line of scrimmage. So Jeff Wilkins comes out again for a 24-yard field goal.
And that's the other thing is these are all just chip shots. So normally when guys are hitting field goals, it's like, all right, here's a 40-yarder. This is literally like they can't punch it in the red zone.
While it sucks if your kicker's going 40-plus on these field goals, you're still outside the red zone. You're still getting points. Does it hurt? Yeah, but you're more happy with your kicker knowing that, like, okay, we're still in this game. Not necessarily happy, but, like, we're still there.
Yep.
But Wilkins makes it 9-7, and there's 6:58 left in the second quarter. So you think about it, just missed opportunities, man. Just missed opportunities. And you only have a 2-point lead when likely you should be up 14 or even more if that shovel pass goes the other way.
Anywhere from 10 to 21 points they should be up. And that's the thing that's kind of ridiculous is people were saying the Rams really were blowing this early in the game.
Yeah, and while they're still winning, they pooch kick it for whatever reason on the following kickoff, and Carolina's fullback Brad Hoover takes it to his own 41.
Yeah.
Which, good field position. You're a couple first downs away from getting into field goal range. And then on this drive, this is kind of a Deshaun Foster drive, I believe. Like, this is where he kind of comes in, because Davis is gone for the rest of the game.
Yeah, he pulls his quad and he's out.
There's a great play where Goings picks up a blitz, and Muhsin Muhammad has a great back shoulder fade from Delhomme. This is kind of the era, too, where you start seeing the quarterbacks underthrowing it because they know with perfect coverage, the back shoulder fade will always be there if the guy's not looking for the football.
Oh, yeah.
And Muhammad uses his size on this play very well, and a very good thrown ball by Delhomme, and gets it down to the 27 of the Rams. Foster gets him another 7-yard run, but there ends up being a holding penalty on Jermaine Wiggins. Then on first down, this is like a stretch of plays where Carolina just keeps shooting themselves in the foot, but then eventually getting it back. Donnelly, their right guard, ends up getting a 15-yard face mask, and they're down to the 27, or they're down to the 27. It's 1st and 35 eventually because of late hits, face masks, and holding penalties.
All of their penalties, yeah.
Muhammad ends up getting him 13 more. Foster goes for 3. And then the 2-minute warning happens, and they have a 3rd and 20 at the St. Louis 34. Then a huge play for them to get them back into field goal range. Foster gets him 7 yards, and John Casey comes in after they call a timeout. And he sneaks the ball right inside the right upright to make it 10-9 Panthers with 1:07 to go. And you could tell at this point, though, after the 2-minute warning, they were trying to bleed the clock so much so St. Louis couldn't get
anything going.
Yeah, exactly. So go into halftime with the lead, you're up 10-9.
Well, that's the thing is they're trying to take the crowd out of it, and they really did, because I bet everybody in the stadium's just like, we should be winning this game. We're losing this game.
Yeah, and at this point, the fans are booing.
Yeah.
And after the Rams get the ball back, they can't do anything with it. Peppers snags him a sack, and the entire Trans World Dome is booing the shit out of the Rams for being down 10-9 at halftime.
And it makes sense, though, because they should be winning this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they should be winning the game, but unfortunately, it's not happening for them.
So they started off. They get the ball in the second, or in the third quarter, second half, whatever you want to say. And this is kind of what I'm saying is, like, I think this is the first time they drive down for a field goal outside of the red zone.
They do,
which is so crazy to think, like, the way this game plays out.
No, and there's a big play by Isaac Bruce to get him 25 yards on this drive.
Which is my favorite, when a guy has a name like this and he gets a catch and the whole stadium, the whole stadium could just join in.
But they end up, Terry Cousin makes a good play against Dane Looker on third down, and Wilkins comes in, kicks it 51 yards, and the Rams are winning 12-10, but in a way, they're kind of losing.
Yeah.
Because
you can tell that it's not, the momentum's not on their side.
Yeah, like, the expression scoreboard, scoreboard. It has to be so disheartening to think, even one touchdown, you're still up by a touchdown.
Exactly.
But on any of these drives, you're just letting Carolina hang around, and they're such a scrappy team that it's the worst kind of team to let hang around. But on the following drive, Hoover gets an 11-yard pass. Then Smith gets 12 on an amazing catch. And then Foster has this run where he makes a cutback against the grain and goes for 18 yards, which really kicks the drive into overdrive. Muhammad made a great block on this play against the defensive back. And then grabs another 7. Goings gets another first down on a third down, and Casey comes in for a 52-yarder. And they were talking about during the telecast all his problems in Philadelphia and everything, and Fox was just like, well, he's still my Pro Bowl kicker, and it's like a golfer who has a bad day, and comes in and drills a 52-yarder, and the Panthers are again now leading the game.
Up 13-12.
13-12.
I want to say this, though. If you watch his kicks, Casey's kicks in this game, they are starting to go right. If you see it, this one this one and especially the next one just barely make it into the post. So it's interesting when we see this later on. Yeah,
and the next St. Louis gets the ball back. They have a good return by Arlen Harris up to about their own 40. And really, this was the play that could have broken the game wide open. Torrey Holt gets unbelievably wide. I don't know. It was a busted coverage by one of the safeties who wasn't playing deep. Bulger hits him with this pretty pass as he would have walked into the end zone, essentially.
Yeah, nobody was back there.
And it just bounces off his hands. And St. Louis is forced to punt.
Well, and we see this, I hate to say it, but they just cannot put the ball in the end zone. So, like, if that was a kick, it would have went.
Yeah.
But literally, he is by himself. And that's probably something that, and some guys say this, it was like, oh, I've never been out there by myself like that.
Right.
So it was so unexpected that I was just like, I don't know what to do.
The easiest ones are somehow the hardest, you know?
Exactly.
It's like, oh, I can catch it with a guy all over me, but when I'm by myself, and, you know, if you looked at probably Torrey Holt's entire career, probably never dropped another pass like that.
Yeah.
Like being that wide open.
Oh, yeah.
Carolina ends up getting it back after dodging that incredible bullet. After a false start by Todd Stussy, Foster ends up running for a first down. But there is a holding penalty that the officials pick up, which was a godsend for Carolina.
I always find this to be interesting when this happens and you play it back. You're like, oh, yeah, well, that was holding. Why did we pick this up? But yeah. it happens, so.
Goings has a nice run in there to almost get a first down, and then Delhomme it looked like a deep in, like a square into Smith for about 20 yards where St. Louis was blitzing on the play, and they just got it off. And then on 3rd and 1, they end up going out there for a Delhomme sneak. And then on 3rd and 8, the drive eventually stalls, and Casey comes in for a 34-yard field goal to make it 16-12, which is like...
So to think about the Rams fans, you have to be so bummed at this point. You're getting into the fourth. You're down 16-12, and you should be dominating this game.
Oh,
and
totally.
It's an interesting thing that you have to deal with as a fan, where you're just like, all right, we have to stick behind them here.
But yeah, Falk runs for first down on the following drive for nothing. Bruce gets a whip route, but the defense for Carolina comes in and really goes after him. But then Bulger makes the biggest mistake of the game.
And this is where you really think the game's over.
Yeah, you really think it's over because it's 16-12. You're basically you're at the end of the third quarter, early fourth quarter, and Mike Minter makes a great interception.
And then run back.
Yeah, St. Louis territory.
It's a great play.
And it was one of those plays where you hate to see this from quarterbacks. And Bulger had 22 touchdowns in the regular season, but also 22 picks. He just threw a ball up for grabs. Minter was in the right spot because that's the way you play your defense, and it was like catching a fly ball.
It was almost like you threw it to him. Unfortunately, if you look at it, you're like, dang, was that for? But yeah, he literally just kind of chucked it up. Minter goes up and gets it and takes it back to like their, I don't even know, like they're 12 or something?
No. They're kind of around midfield.
Okay, midfield.
Yeah, but...
oh, yeah.
They got it by about their own 30. They end up marching it. They have a good 10-yard run by Foster on a pitch play.
Yep.
Then Delhomme has a 36-yarder to Smith on a double move, which really gets him down in St. Louis 26. And as they drive into the red zone, Foster loses a couple, and then on 3rd and 14 on a weak eye formation, great cross block again, like you saw on the Davis one, and he ends up getting a first down. And then by the end of the drive, and it made Daryl Johnston, Emmitt Smith's lead blocker back in the day, so happy when Brad Hoover runs it in for 9 yards and a touchdown. With 9:44 to go, they're up 11 points, which pretty dang incredible.
Yeah, to think Panthers are really doing everything that they can right.
Yeah.
Rams are doing everything they can to lose it, essentially.
St. Louis has every opportunity to make it a blowout, but what Carolina is doing is taking every opportunity they can and crossing the goal line, most importantly, because they have the 2 touchdowns. But Rams get the ball back, and on the first play from scrimmage, Bulger throws another pick. This is the one that you were talking about.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Dion Grant. Yeah. And, 8:40 to go. They have the ball on the St. Louis 28. Foster gets a 3-yard run, and then Delhomme ends up getting a pass batted down. And you're thinking this game is sealed, even though they don't have, they're kicking a longer field goal. If they go up by 14 points with the amount of time that's left on the clock, even though it is the Rams, you're thinking, game over.
Yeah, like they can kill this clock.
Let enough clock,
yeah. And this is what I was referencing earlier is Casey's been hitting them a little right, and then they come up to kick this field goal.
And he's a lefty kicker, so he's hooking it.
And he's hooking it, and he compensates too much, and it goes too much left.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, kicking a 53-yard field goal, even indoors, is not easy at all.
No, it's not. But yeah, this is the thing where kicking, you almost never think about it until it becomes a problem. Yeah. And that's something that I found with this game. It's just like, you never would be like, oh man, we need like the best kicker. But when a game like this, where you're just like, we can't punch it in, it's just like, God, I'm so glad our kicker's reliable. That's the only thing you want is reliability.
It's like a bullpen in baseball. That's what I always equate special teams to, is just a bullpen. But there's 6:29 left, and this is where Marshall Falk goes into beast mode, because the Rams finally start getting everything together.
Well, I found it to be very much like the Rams drive in the Super Bowl, where they were just like, all right, we're giving it to our star. If you can stop him, do it. Because almost every play during this drive is to fucking Falk.
Well, and the and the announcers in this game at this point, after the 2 picks by Bulger, were saying, is Martz going to put Warner in? Because Warner's healed from his broken thumb. They just decided to bench him and play the younger kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, Falk has a great dump off pass from Bulger. Then he gets a first down to move the sticks at 3rd and 3 later in the drive, and then gets a great throw from Bulger to Bruce on an out route. But they're at 3rd and 10 on their own 46. Mike Furry gets 8 yards to set up a 4th and 2. And then they're talking about, with 4:54 in the game, to go for a 56-yard field goal with Wilkins, or to go for it. Because that's a long way to kick a football, and if you miss, the game is effectively over.
Yeah.
But he throws this 22-yard teardrop to Falk out of the backfield. And it's an amazing throw, an amazing catch. You keep the sticks moving. And again, 3rd and 10 later in the drive, 4:40 to go. Falk makes an amazing play on a whip route, and they get the ball all the way down to the 5-yard line. And then they finally get it in with Marshall Falk.
Punching it in.
Yeah, just kind of punching it in.
I found it interesting how many 3rd downs they converted in this, and we see this
3rd and 4th downs.
Yeah.
Multiple, yeah.
Well, that's and we see this later on, is like, this is kind of what this game is like the later downs really define this game.
So they're 23-18 with 2:39 to go, and they have to go for 2.
Yeah, you have to. There's no doubt.
Like you would rather, if you end up getting the ball back, you would rather go for a field goal and a touchdown to send it to overtime, and we'll definitely bring this up later for what transpires. They go for 2, and Bulger hits Dane Looker. So you're down 23-20, and they go for an onside kick. The Panthers call a timeout before the onside kick.
Which is weird.
Maybe to ice him. But what ends up happening, Jeff Wilkins kicks. You know what an onside kick looks like. If you don't, it's where the kicker kind of like bounces it, doesn't kick it very. Like, the goal is to bounce it as high as possible and make it bounce as weirdly as possible. Make it go 10 yards so your guys have a chance to recover it. Wilkins kick. I've never seen an onside kick do this in my entire 30 plus years of watching pro, college, whatever football. On one of the bounces, instead of moving forward, it just deadens and bounces in the air.
Almost like straight up.
And
it's awesome.
People talk mad shit about kickers, but Wilkins hustling on the play. out jumps Carolina's hands team, protects his body, and catches it mid-air to come down with the ball at his own 42.
Well, I feel like he could see the trajectory of it, and he was just like, oh, that's mine. It's one of the better onside kicks because they almost never work. That's the thing is like you see them and like when you get a weird ass bounce like this is when they work, is nobody can follow the path of the ball, and the kicker was right there.
And St. Louis now has momentum. Now they're cooking. Bruce gets him down to the Carolina 38 on the first play. Then another pass to Bruce gets him to the 25. And yes, they're in field goal range. And yes, you're down 3 to send the game to overtime. But the Rams have not only weapons, they're moving the ball at will. They literally stopped trying in this drive to play for overtime.
Yeah, I saw, which is a weird, because they were like, we don't want to turn the ball over. But in that essence, you're like, we don't want to win the game.
And Johnson was pissed in the booth, like commentating on this game. He's just like, yeah, you're in field goal range, but you're supposedly the best offense that's ever existed. Try and score. Take some shots.
How are you not going to trust your offense in this scenario? Like, if you're not trusting your offense, you really shouldn't win.
Yeah, and I mean, you're essentially playing in this situation not to lose. I'm not saying you need to, have
bomb it,
5-7 step dropbacks, sacks, anything like that. But man, you have matchup advantages, chess pieces all around the field, and they get to the Carolina 15-yard line, and with 25 seconds left, that's enough to run 3 plays. They don't care.
Yeah.
Wilkins comes in and drills a 33-yard field goal, and the game is in overtime. And we'll talk about this after the episode, but that decision-making by Martz probably will haunt him forever.
It really is a horrible decision just to not even try to go for it. And I know that they're being stopped constantly in the red zone. Like, that's like the theme here. But like, how do you not give it to Falk? I'm just saying.
What was it? Herm Edwards. You play to win the game.
Yeah, seriously.
So it's overtime, and it's overtime for the playoffs, which if in this time it was sudden death. First score wins the game.
So a field goal even.
Yeah, even a field goal. And in this, one of the stats that was brought up on the telecast, 8 field goals ties a playoff record.
Well, I mean, that's literally
Wilkins 5 tied it too.
Yep, that's how the Rams were able to stay,
But the crowd is back in it now
horrible
for St. Louis, despite the fact that they played for the tie.
Well, they realized they're like, okay, we can win this.
Tony Siragusa, the sideline guy, is like, I can't even hear myself think because it's so loud in that dome. But Carolina gets the ball. Delhomme has a 44-yard pass on this drive, or gets it to the St. Louis 44. And on 3rd and 8, they end up moving the ball again. Delhomme ran right. Muhammad made a great catch, and then there was a great throw to Jermaine Wiggins, who was eventually came across the middle. He had only caught 8 passes all year, and it's 1st and 10 at St. Louis's 21. So you're thinking,
this is it.
This is it. They end up moving the ball to the middle of the field with Delhomme to, make it easier for Casey. On 2nd down, they want to kick it, but they have a delay of game penalty, which pushes them back more, so they send their offense back onto the field.
To try and get a little bit more yardage, to try and get them back to an easier kick.
Mm-hmm. And the Rams call a timeout. Goings gets a couple of yards. And what ends up happening, they still have to kick a 45-yard field goal instead of a 40-yarder. Casey comes out. It's looking good at first, but it goes wide right. He hooks it again. And I think it was either Stockton or Johnson said, if they kicked it from 40 because it just missed, it might have gone through.
You could see it because the way his kick is, it's really just like curving outside of the post. And that kick probably would have made it if they just would have kicked it without that delay of game penalty. That's what really screwed them over and this is what sucks is you see the penalties cost, teams games, and then we see the Rams take it down.
And Bruce has 2 great catches on this drive to move it almost into field goal range, but the Rams end up calling a timeout. Peppers makes a great play to bat down another pass and on a screen to Fury, and Wilkins comes out for a 53-yard field goal. Fox calls it time because this was the era, you remember, where we're gonna ice the kicker.
Yeah. And then he ends up missing it short.
Barely short, too. Oh, man.
Almost hits that bottom bar, yeah.
Yeah, he almost hits the crossbar.
Which you see it, and because it's so hard to tell with those, you're like, wait, did that go over or not? And yeah, it's a bummer for this Rams team.
But on the following drive for Carolina, Muhammad gets it down to the St. Louis 36. But then this is a weird game because it's not like it's the greatest played game ever because there's just mistakes abound.
But it's so entertaining.
Yeah. Oh, it's very entertaining. There's a mix-up between Foster and Delhomme on the snap on this play. They end up losing 6 yards. Then Stussy has a false start. And then Delhomme has a pass batted. And they end up punting it, but Sauerbrunn has a great punt down to St. Louis's 15-yard line. So they were on the edge of field goal range, got knocked out, Sauerbrunn saved their ass, and now they got to go play defense again. And we're nearing the end of the first overtime.
Yep.
And as we talked about in our Chiefs and Dolphins episode, overtime is just like overtime in the regular season, except you can't tie in the postseason. What ends up happening is you just play a second quarter.
Yep.
It's just an extension. Like, you don't have to kick off again. It's just like you're playing another game.
They say this is really the sixth quarter. Mm-hmm. So, with the new overtime, you almost kind of restart with the coin toss and all of that kind of shit. With this, they're just like, no, we're just playing until somebody does something.
Yeah. So they end up moving it a little bit. Bulger has a nice scramble. Falk has a good catch. But they end up having to punt it away. And there is, or not, no, they don't punt it away.
Yeah.
On this play, on this drive, this was the drive. Danny Manning, not the basketball player, makes another one-handed pick of Bulger. I like that fucking Danny Manning. That's so good.
That's great.
And he was actually starting for Cousin in this game. He had replaced him towards the end of the regular season. So they end up getting the ball back at their own 35. They end up, Carolina's own 35.
Yes.
And at this point, Foster gets stuffed by Wistrom on first down. And Delhomme avoids a sack and gets back to the line of scrimmage. And the first overtime is over. These teams are exhausted. And like I said before, and this comes back into play, you don't lose possession in the postseason after the first overtime. It's the same way now. It's just different rules about sudden death. And they're facing a 3rd and 14 at their own 35. St. Louis is probably going to get decent field position back unless Sauerbrunn does it again. And instead of going for the safe draw or screen or just extending the game,
they go for the win.
Carolina says, fuck it, we're going for a first down and more. That's the only way you can describe this. Smith runs a deep post. Delhomme hits him in stride.
And he's gone.
You watch this replay. To me, it's an iconic NFL play that nobody ever talks about anymore. But a great throw on time to a guy running full speed who's very fast, splits the defense, and is not even touched.
No, that's the thing is you would think you were like, whoa, was that missed coverage? It's just like, no, that was a perfectly ran play, route, pass, all of it. And then he's just literally wide open for a touchdown. And this is why we were talking about was so bad was the Rams should have won this game a million times over. Yeah. And the Panthers stuck with it and ended up winning.
Well, and I mean, it wasn't like they just called the right play against the right defensive alignment, and Steve Smith outran everybody. He outran everybody to the house. They win 29-13 on the first play of double overtime. At the time, it was the 5th longest game ever played. And now let's get into the aftermath.
Well, I mean, this is what these games kind of happen is they have this pond ripple effect for these franchises.
So Carolina parlays that victory into going to Philadelphia the following weekend and playing the ever popular Andy Reid Eagles that always seem to lose NFC title games to inferior opponents. And they won that game.
Yep.
And then they played one of the best Super Bowls ever played against the New England Patriots in a game they probably should have won. They ended up losing, of course, on an Adam Vinatieri field goal, but it really set Carolina going for like the next 5 years where they were in the playoffs in 2005. They were the number 2 seed in 2008. Steve Smith actually won the receiving Triple Crown in 2005.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really set them up on a nice run till about 2010 after Fox got fired and went to Denver. St. Louis, dear Jesus, this was, at the time you knew it was bad, but in my own opinion, this was the end of football, professional football in St. Louis, this game.
Well, it felt like they were like, this is our last gasp, because
with the core,
with the core. And then they were like, and we're really not going to rebuild anything. It was like, we're going to be a bad team. And it was just kind of like, okay, like if you were a St. Louis fan, it's so weird because they had this unbelievable fan base and they were just like, nah, we're going to major league this bad boy.
Guys got older. I mean, in 2003, that was both Falk and Bruce's 10th years in the league. Really, they only had Torrey Holt. In 2004, they did make a smart move and draft Steven Jackson, the running back, who had a tremendous career. But like I said, that home field advantage after that playoff game was gone.
Yeah.
In 2004, they got a wild card. They beat Seattle in Seattle, but they missed the playoffs from 2005 until 2015 every single year. There was apathy towards the franchise. They couldn't get anybody rebuilding. And in a baseball town like St. Louis, and yes, we can call it a baseball town, their owner moved them. And an interesting fact, this game we're talking about right now was the last NFL postseason game played in St. Louis.
And it'll be the last one ever. I doubt they'll ever get a franchise.
I don't think another team will move there. I really don't. And it's just a damn shame because that greatest show on turf, when you want to pick an end to it, this is the end.
Yeah.
It's all over. Guys were either traded, guys retired. I mean, this was the end. And they would have gone into Philadelphia and beat them easily. They'd beat them in the 0-1 championship game. And then if they play that Super Bowl against New England, who the hell knows what happened?
I was going to say, Warner's back. It's such an interesting...
Warner's not back, but I mean, there was matchup problems. If Carolina gave him that many fits, geez.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And if St. Louis wins 2 Super Bowls in basically a 5-year span, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
They are not leaving, Stan Kroenke doesn't take them to Los Angeles where they can ram it. Have you ever seen that music video?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If you ram it all day, I learned long ago, if you ram it just right, you can ram it all day and ram it all night.
Well, they became the cheesiest team, and they did that cheese into a Super Bowl victory.
Yes, they did in '99. Sorry, St. Louis, but 2003 Rams-Panthers.